It's Sabbath Sunday and we're back. Darren and I answering more of your questions. Feel free to keep them coming in the comment section down below. This is something that we're going to keep doing. We're having a lot of fun with. We're also going to be tackling some other random Sabbath topics that will show up on our Sabbath Sunday Sabbath show. Okay, here we go. This week we answered questions from Carl Willigut, Damon Scott, In My House 11, Dean Leslie, Robert Forrett, and Tom Mandino. So enjoy.
All right, I think we might have missed a few here in the middle, so I'm going to grab these couple that we missed. All right, Carl Wilgut says, being that Sabbath dropped their two albums in 1970, why do you think there weren't more bands that played in the Sabbath style in the 70s? It wasn't until the 80s that doom metal really came about. Further, what bands' albums do you think hold up with Sabbath? Yeah, that's interesting. You know, sometimes I think to myself that maybe it was like Black Sabbath had, it's like they had the secret formula. You know, they figured out how to be this heavy, and it really took people a while to catch up with Sabbath. And although other people, when they name drop the other heavy bands like of the early 70s, like Purple, Heap, Uriah Heep, Budgie, Blue Cheer, those bands are certainly heavy, but they're still not as heavy as Black Sabbath, and they still don't have that dark overtone that Black Sabbath had with things like Into the Void and the song Black Sabbath. So I don't know what it was. I think it was just that there was just a real chemistry between those guys. I think Tony Iommi has a really unique guitar sound, and the way he constructed his riffs was really neat. He was coming from the same blues background as the guys in Uriah Heep, the guys in Zeppelin, but where, you know, Zeppelin would get heavy with something like Communication Breakdown, Sabbath was doing War Pigs or NIB, and I think it was just, I don't know, there was just a chemistry between those guys, and Iommi's guitar sound, Geezer's heavy bass, the way Bill played drums, he just put it all together, mix it in a cauldron, and you get something really, really heavy. And what album? Well, go ahead, Darren. You comment on that, and then we'll do the other part of this question.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more obscure bands from the 70s that were probably as heavy in some aspects as Sabbath, but there was just a little something missing. Sabbath had the heaviness, they had the songcraft, they had the emotion, they had everything was on point. It was a great package. It was all wrapped up with a bow. It was perfect. There were other bands that were heavy, you know, Necromandus. We could talk about Incredible Hog. We could talk about the band War Pig. We could talk about it was a band from Australia.
Volcano, Buffalo. Yeah. Wow. Volcano Rock is the name.
Volcano Rock. First three albums I think were really cool. Did I say Bang?
Yeah, Bang and
Bang.
Sir Lord Baltimore and Captain
Doc. I mean, there's a lot of heavy bands that were coming out and around that time. But where maybe the guitar tone was cool and it was heavy, maybe there's the vocals not so much, or maybe it was the songwriting not so much, or maybe the songwriting was on point, but the guitar tone wasn't as heavy. There's just something that made it so that those bands are really cool to listen to, but did they have the same overall package, everything, all cylinders firing at the same time as Sabbath? No. And there might be some people that would argue. Some people love some of those bands and defend them and tout them in an unrealistic way. And I think it's just to be different, but you know, that's cool.
Yeah. Too. I agree with you. All those albums, there's aspects of them that are heavy, but none of them have it all happening the way Black Sabbath did. They're all missing one particular element of it or another. It's usually in the songwriting. Usually those albums have a certain number of really heavy songs, and then there's a couple songs that are just, you know, don't fit or whatever. Just nobody put it all together like Black Sabbath did with the production, the songs, the riffs, the the uniqueness of Ozzie's voice, just the whole thing. All right, then he asks further, what band's albums do you think hold up with Sabbath? Well, I guess if we're talking about the 70s, I mean, I'd put Deep Purple, of course, and Uriah
Yeah.
Heep. We mentioned them, Zeppelin. The big bands from the 70s. Thin Lizzy, UFO, Priest, of course. Like when Priest is, if you're just talking pound for pound heaviness, I'd say Priest would maybe be the first real challenger to really be able to get in the ring with Sabbath. Rainbow Rising and the Dio era of Rainbow. Those albums were heavy, great songwriting, great playing. Those are the albums that come to mind for me, for ones that had all the elements. Again, there's these one-off bands, one album that heavy aspects of it, but bands had really put it together with great vocals, great playing, great production, great singing, great songwriting, great album covers. For me, that's like Zeppelin, Purple, Heap, Rainbow, Thin Lizzy, UFO, 70s era Scorpions.
Yeah, all of the above: UFO, Scorps, Thin Lizzy. For me, it was the Holy Trinity: was Sabbath, Purple, and Heap.
Yeah.
I got everything I needed just from those three bands. Anything else? I mean, Zeppelin, I could, okay. But man, you just give me Sabbath, Purple, and Heap, I'm good. That's all I need. That in a desert island, I'm all right. I just think everything that everything that there is to want about heavy rock can be found in those three bands. Now, I mean, when you get further into the Uriah Heep discography, when you start to get into the John Lawton era, some of it gets a little bit hit and miss, but certainly the David Byron era, man. I mean, it's pretty consistent. Towards the end, it kind of drops off a little bit. I mean, I love those albums too. Yeah. Deep Purple, I'm cool with just about every studio album. Yeah, I there really isn't a Deep Purple studio album that I don't like.
All right, Damon Scott asks, how about most underrated Sabbath album? Well, that would have to probably come from the Tony Martin era, because the whole Tony Martin era is pretty underrated. So I would probably say Eternal Idol. We talked about Eternal Idol. If I want to go even a little deeper, I'd say Tear is a very underrated album. But for me, it's got to come from the Martin era, because just the whole Martin era is criminally underrated, in my opinion.
I think there is a underrated album per era. I would say from the Ozzie era that the most underrated album is Technical Ecstasy. I think it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. I think I don't really think there was an underrated album from the Dio era. Are we talking songs or are we talking albums?
Album.
Yeah, no, I think every Dio album pretty much got its due. From the Tony Martin era, for me, I think it's definitely not Headless Cross. That one gets the most amount of attention, and that's a bit of a point of contention for me. I liked Cross Purposes when it came out. I like it more now, and there's a couple songs that have really resonated really well for me as time has gone on, and one of them is Dying for Love. I love the melody in that. Man, I didn't care for that song at all when I first got the album. I thought, As soon as I heard the keyboards in the beginning, I'm like, next. But the more that I've been listening to it, and I just love the melody in that song. And I think that song for song, even a song like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, I think that has kind of a more of a commercial mainstream sound to it, but it's a rocker. It's a good song. I think song for song, Cross Purposes is a really good album. I would say Tear might have been the one I would have said, but I think that album has some issues, and it's a little bit more hit and miss. I can't really support that as an underrated album. I think that kind of falls into the history of more or less where it should. I like it, but I think that it more or less falls in history as to where it should be. Cross Purposes, not so much. I think it should get more credit.
Right, in my house 11, what did you guys think about Born Again, production quality, artwork, Gillan as Sabbath frontman? Well, we touched on a bunch of those. I think we've already sort of talked about what we thought about Born Again. The production quality, I don't think it's very good. I think it's the major problem with that album. I'm not a fan of remixes, but if they want to remix this album, I would buy it. It is sort of distracting, but at this point, is it one of these things where we're so used to it that a remix of it might throw people for a loop? The artwork, I always thought the album cover was cool, but I was 12 or 13 years old when this album came out. So for me, a little baby devil thing was kind of like, wow, cool, man. I could sort of see later on how it's a little, but I think it's cool. And we've already sort of talked at length about Gillan as what we think about him as a Sabbath frontman. But so, what do you think about what do you think of the production quality and the artwork?
The production quality leaves a lot to be desired. I think that we have kind of adapted to it, and I obviously, like we just talked about a little while ago, people love the album. It was a real disappointment for me, and I think I've never really gotten over it. I can't warm up to the fact that the sound is so murky that I think that it covers up a lot of things that I think it would definitely benefit from a remix, because I think the production, the way that it is, covers up a lot of things that I think if it were brought up more, brought out, I would probably find a whole new appreciation for the album. The album cover, yeah, I mean, that never bothered me. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was like kind of extreme at the time that it came out. I remember seeing it on the record store wall when it was released.
Yeah, it jumps out because of the red.
Yeah, I like Steve Crusher Jewel, his font, his
yeah.
He was also doing stuff for Ozzie too, so there was kind of a crossover there. And actually kind of inadvertently kind of crossed the two things over into one another by way of artwork and by way of graphic design, I suppose. So no, I definitely thought that was cool. My only thing was I thought the album sounded rushed. I'm not going to go too far into this because we're going to get all involved in this in our podcast. But I thought the songs would have benefited from maybe a little bit more time, maybe a little bit more refinement. But maybe in some ways that's cool. It kind of gives it more of a spontaneity, kind of gives it more energy. So I'm all right with that. I had my big thing though is production. I think the production is really murky, and I think if they were to correct that in the future, I think it'd make a big difference.
Yeah. Okay, Dean Leslie, he's got a bunch of questions here, so we'll try to answer these as quick as we can. Is Tony Iommi the most influential and inspired, not necessarily the best guitarist of all time? Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned here about how Black Sabbath is so important to heavy metal, and yeah, I think Iommi, he may not technically be the most advanced guitar player or something, but for influence, I think he's highly influential.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely influenced a few different genres, and the riffs are they're legendary. Iommi has basically spearheaded an entire genre of Iommi worship, talking about the stoner rock doom genre. I mean, it wouldn't exist at all if it weren't for Tony Iommi, or if it did, it would certainly not be what it is. Otherwise, I mean, like we touched on briefly, I mean, it's had an impact on punk and hardcore. Certainly the songs of Black Flag in the 80s, 82 to 84, maybe possibly even beyond. Some of the solo Henry Rollins stuff, definitely. Henry Rollins was a big Black Sabbath fan, unapologetically so. He doesn't make any excuses. He doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't try to qualify it by, referencing something that he thinks is cool. Just flat out says, I love Black Sabbath. Solo stuff, it definitely has a very Black Sabbath influence. So I think the influence of Tony Iommi, to get back to answering the question, yeah, I think he's definitely influential, probably more so than people realize. I think there's probably a lot of Tony Iommi that exists in music that we're not even really that aware of. It's classic rock radio, plays War Pigs, Iron Man, Paranoid. Uh, Whether people realize it or not, they've probably heard more Black Sabbath songs than they're actually probably they realize. Yeah, very influential.
Is Ozzy overrated? No, not in my opinion.
Depends. I mean, in what way? As a singer?
Well, he just says is Ozzy overrated. I mean, is he technically the greatest singer in the world? No, but you don't have a 50 plus year career. You don't bluff your way through a 50-year career. He obviously has something that works for him. He's, I mean, from a technical standpoint, yes, he's not the greatest singer, but he clearly has a unique voice and he brings something to the table. That's how he's been able to maintain a career for as long as he has.
I wouldn't have gotten into Black Sabbath initially if it weren't for Ozzy's voice. It's not to say, not to take anything away from the guitar playing. That was the second thing for me. The first thing was Ozzy's voice. I love Ozzy's voice. I love it even now, even though I love it when it's bad. It just has a certain sound. I think it just sounds really cool. Is he overrated? Was that the question? Overrated?
Yeah.
You know what? Ozzy gets such a bad rap, and I see it a lot on social media, and I see it on comments on forum boards and things like that. Everybody loves to crusade for people that were involved with Ozzy, and I get it. I mean, there were some dirty deals that went down, and I understand, and it certainly it's not good. But when they bash Ozzy and say that Blizzard and Diary wouldn't have been the albums they were without Bob, Lee, and Randy, well, of course that's true. But you have to think about it from the other aspect. Would those albums have been what they are without Ozzy? I mean, how would they have sounded if Bob Daisley sang? A lot different, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a self-sufficient three-piece band with Ozzy stuck in there just moving along for the ride. I mean, it was Ozzy's voice, Ozzy's notoriety that sold those records, and people saying, well, it was originally intended to be a band and it should have been a band. Well, yeah, I guess they could have tried that and see how far it went. But really, when you're coming out of the gate and you're trying to push something, and and record labels have been known to do this. They'll exploit certain aspects of people in the lineup or something that's even relatively vague. They'll exploit to try to get more people to be interested in it, to buy it. Certainly the most noteworthy thing about the band was that it contained the former lead singer of Black Sabbath, not that it had the bass player from Rainbow or the former drummer from Uriah Heep. Not to take anything away from those musicians, they're great. Their contributions were profound. And also it wasn't an unknown, relatively obscure guitar player from Los Angeles that was selling these albums. His contribution was incredible. We know that. We don't even have to talk about it. We just know that. But without Ozzy's voice, without Ozzy's name on it, I don't think those albums would have reached the audience that they did and gotten those musicians the attention and the acclaim that they ultimately enjoyed. For Randy, unfortunately, it was short-lived. That's awful. That's the downside to it all. The other downside to it is that the legacy of that band is unfortunately marred by the bad business of the Osbournes. Yeah. And that's really unfortunate. And I wish that weren't the case. But Bob did go on to work with Ozzy for several years later after they kind of reconciled himself to dealing with the Osbournes in a certain way where he wasn't going to kid himself and think that he was going to be reaping equal credit on the royalties or anything like that. I think he agreed to a settlement, payout, cash, give me my money and let's call it a day. But he continued to work with Ozzy. He liked Ozzy. He liked working with Ozzy, and he liked Ozzy as a person, and he liked the music that they made together. So, he sacrificed probably some bad business decisions on the basis of having maybe more of a creative, rewarding creative experience. But like I said, it does kind of get me down. I read a lot of people's comments and things saying how, Ozzy was such a hack and this and that. And, I wouldn't go that far. I think Ozzy brought a lot to the table. He could have probably brought more, but I think what he brought was enough to basically put those records on the map.
All right. I think we answered this next question that he asks, and for the sake of time, but he does say along those lines, should Ozzy have his name on the writing credits, since it's pretty well known Geezer wrote the lyrics and Tony all the music? Should Bill Ward's name be on the credits? Yes and yes. Ozzy did the melodies, and Ozzy did come up with some lyrics here and there. I always say this, if you want to know what Ozzy brought to Black Sabbath, listen to the Dave Walker version of Junior's Eyes. Dave Walker was the guy that was briefly replaced Ozzy right before Never Say Die was recorded, and the Ozzy version of Junior's Eyes, in my opinion, is far superior to the Dave Walker version. So yes, everybody in Black Sabbath contributed in one way or another. Bill with the arrangements, Tony with the riffs, of course, Geezer with riffs and lyrics, and Ozzy with melody lines. And Geezer says all the time that Ozzy would have little lines or a little phrase here and there, and that would often be the jumping off point for Geezer to finish out the lyrics.
Yeah, I don't understand that. So Ozzy's name shouldn't be on the writing credits. I mean, I don't really think there was any actual writing going on. Exactly. I think it was all in a way of agreement, like most bands do. They'll get into a room together, they'll jam, they'll bring some ideas to the table. I mean, some musicians in a different, level of expertise will bring, sheet music, and they'll pass it out, and everybody will learn the songs and come together, reassemble and learn the songs based on the sheet music that was written, or they'll add and do that. But in rock and roll and hard rock and heavy metal, it's not very common to do things that way. Everything was pretty much intellectual, bringing ideas, bringing riffs, stopping, saying, hey, that's cool, do that here. Ozzy getting up or being in the other room while the band is rehearsing, moving in or running in and saying, oh, I play that riff again, I've got this idea. And then basically, fleshing out a melody with his voice, not lyrically, just phonetically, and then moving on with that melody while the band's playing. Bill Ward coming in, reacting to what he's hearing, laying down some really inspired drum fills and cool beats and drum patterns and things like that. All of them contributed, and I think all of them deserve the writing credit on the albums.
Yeah, and it depends on the band. Some bands do it differently. Queen, whoever wrote the lyrics and the melody and the chords and all that, got the writing credit. So if you look at Queen, there's Brian May songs, there's Roger Taylor songs, there's Freddie Mercury songs. Different bands just worked in different ways. Black Sabbath, everybody just got their name on it until it was just, when you got to like the Tony Martin era, then it was mostly Naomi and Martin and Powell, or whoever else was on the records. But it depends on the band. But I get why he's asking that, because that's a common thing that, well, Ozzy doesn't write his lyrics, so why does he get writing credit in anything that he does? Well, it's because he supplies the melody line, and a lot of times he does sort of have a title or a line or something here and there. And if you listen to these deluxe versions of some of the early albums, you can hear Ozzy kind of riffing and just making up gibberish type lyrics for a lot of these songs. But you'll hear little words and phrases here and there that he did have, that you can tell that Geezer probably took that and then, ran with it for the lyrics. So.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I don't know what you mean by writing. As far as the musicians sitting down with a pen and paper and writing down what they're doing, is that because
no, he means like when you
think...
look at the album and you look at a Queen album and it says "We Will Rock You," Brian May, whatever. It's just different bands do it different ways.
Well, I think this thing got into like a runaway train type of thing, where Ozzy just kind of started to snowball. Like, Ozzy's useless. He didn't do anything. I mean, it's been well documented by at least Geezer would say that he would work off of Ozzie's melodies. Even
Yeah.
Bob Daisley said that, a lot of the lyrics were penned to correspond to Ozzie's melodies. And when you hear the story of Dana Strum, when he met Ozzie in the hotel room, and he asked, well, do you have anything? What are you going to start when you're going to put a band together? What are you bringing to the table? And Ozzie just pointed at his head and he said, it's all in here. It's all in here. And Dana was like, well, yeah, okay, wow. And then he's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. You have melodies. You have things that you can put out there. So, I wouldn't, unless you were there. I wasn't, of course, but I know that from what I've read, that Ozzie's melodies are very important to the formation of the songs. And if anything was significant to the formation of the songs, then I think it deserves writing credit.
Absolutely. All right, we are caught back up with some of the questions we had missed there. So do you want to pick it up with Robert Forret?
I think I gapped on some of these.
Yeah, we caught up. We were back caught up with Lopez, Alabama, which was the Speak of the Devil songs, but I can keep reading them if you don't.
I have a Robert Forret. I want to know what the next Black Sabbath box will be and when. I thought after Paranoid Volume 4 and Sab, they would finish the top 6. We are all in the dark, and maybe they would give us the next for Christmas. But so far, nothing. It was fun to guess what would be next. I don't know. I can run that a sequence. But anyway, yeah, I think it is getting. I think John and I, we talked about. We thought there was going to be a big one that was going to drop around Christmas time. I think we're getting a little close to that now. I think if there was going to be one that was going to drop around Christmas time, we probably would have heard about it by now.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. What do I think the next one would be? It's anybody's guess, but I can't imagine there's not going to be one for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, that there isn't going to be one for Master of Reality or the self-titled album. Never Say Die, I guess, is questionable. I feel less confident with the possibility of that. But on the other hand, why would they do every other
7?
one?
Yeah. But this is Black Sabbath. I'm going to believe it when until we get an official press release. For me, I'm still nervous that Never Say Die isn't going to happen.
I think the really big one at this point, the big release would probably be Master of Reality. I can see there being a huge campaign for that. When you have the iconic wavy logo, you've got Sweet Leaf on there, you've got Children of the Grave. Yeah, they can certainly get a lot of mileage out of that. They can do a pretty big advertising campaign for that, and I think even casual fans would probably be interested in that. By all accounts, it seems as though Technical Ecstasy did really well, and that's kind of a deep cut album. So I mean, if that one did fairly well, I can only imagine the remaining 4 doing just as well, with possibly the exception of Never Say Die. But
yeah, I'm shocked that they didn't cash in on Christmas. I really thought that any marketing person would say you want something for the Sabbath fan in your life, that you can buy for them for Christmas. So I thought for sure that it was all going to pan out, that we would get a biggie like the first album or Master of Reality. It'd be a big one, an expensive one, and it would be right there for Christmas for everybody to get for their Sabbath loving, person in their family. But who knows? I mean, maybe they are going to surprise us and something will come up. It doesn't feel that way. They've been going at a clip of about every 3 months one comes out, every 3 or 4 months.
I think and Technical Ecstasy just came out about like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. Yeah. You got to give that a little bit of time to circulate. People are still kind of getting caught up with that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some news later in the week, early next week. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, and it would still pretty much put it on target for around Christmas time.
Yeah.
I would say that if it goes beyond the next couple of weeks, then we probably won't have one for Christmas. to be
All right,
really.
Tom Mandino asks, what makes Sabbath such a special band? To the songs, the riffs, just, everything about them. Ozzie, Dio. For me, it's if you had to distill it down to one thing, it's the music, it's the songs. We talked about all these other obscure heavy bands from the 70s, and what separates Sabbath from them, for me, amongst a whole bunch of things, is the songs. Sabbath has good songs through the Ozzy era, the Dio era. You can make arguments, maybe if you're not a fan of some of the other stuff, but other eras. But for me, what makes them special is the songs and the people, the unique characters that they had in a band. Naomi is a very unique guitar player. Ozzy has a very unique voice. Dio has a very unique voice. Geezer plays the bass in a very unique way. You put all that together, all that would mean nothing if you didn't have songs. So first, they've got the songs. Second, they've got the unique, strong individual personalities. Even if you're not a fan of the Martin era or Seventh Star, Glenn Hughes is still an amazing singer. Always good players in the band. Cozy Powell's an amazing, unique, strong, identifiable drummer. Sabbath always had great players in the band. Ian Gillan put that together with great songwriting, and that's why they're such a special band.
Yeah, I agree. The songs, the melodies, they stay in your head. Even it's something as simple as Iron Man. Who can forget Iron Man? It's almost like a nursery rhyme in a way. The way that the melody is so basic, but the music behind it is really heavy, and it's a very it's a well-crafted song. It insofar as it does what it's supposed to. It makes you tap your foot. You remember it after you've heard it. You want to hear it again because you want to, you like the melody. And a lot of their songs are like that. There's something that is powerful in the way that they crafted the songs and the melodies that were in the songs that would keep you wanting to come back and listen to them. Ozzy's voice, for me, that was the main attraction. It still is. I still love Ozzy's voice. And secondly would be Naomi's guitar. I love that deep, rich tone when it comes to heavy hard rock, heavy metal guitar. I think he's definitely the master of that. I mean, yeah, if you want rich, heavy, thick guitar tone, Black Sabbath is pretty much your one-stop shop from the Ozzy era, certainly through the Dio and beyond. I think that then some of it was lost a little bit in the '80s, late '80s, but Naomi's Naomi. I mean, even when you try to dilute him, he's still thick. He still rises. His tone just kind of bubbles like a black bubble up to the top of the water. Even if you try to dilute it, you can't. It's impervious to dilution.